Over to you, Benisha. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. You're on mute.
Sorry, just one sec. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this informative session on the state of the Indian art market, where our experts will offer insights on the art market's latest trends and opportunities, and of course, release the much-awaited comprehensive State of the Indian Art Market report for FY23. I am Venetia Vickers, head of the financial knowledge team at Indian Art Investor. Indian Art Investor is an independent, first-of-its-kind art market intelligence firm focused on Indian art. We provide collectors, investors, and connoisseurs of Indian art with an objective 360-degree data-driven approach to decision-making via data-driven critical industry reports. Before we dive right in, I just want to let you know that you can leave your questions in the Q&A box and we will address them at the end of this session. So first and foremost, let me introduce you to our experts who will be sharing their valuable insights on this rather niche market. Arvind Vijay Mohan is the founder of Indian Art Investor. Since 2002, Arvind and his team have advised the firm's clients, a select group of ultra-high net worth individuals and families of Indian origin, on acquisitions of prized Indian art assets. His clients' engagements involve strategizing a blend of wealth creation and capital preservation functions, along with legacy building directives. Arvind is regarded as an authority in the Indian art industry. He has extensively conducted knowledge sessions across a wide range of speaker forums on how to collect and invest in art prudently. And his views on Indian art have been featured in leading publications such as the Economic Times, the New Indian Express, Financial Chronicle, the Financial Express, amongst many others. His weekly podcast, Art of the Matter, produced by Red FM, is available on all channels, including Spotify, JioSaavn, Gaana, and Apple Podcasts. Welcome, Arvind.
Thank you very much, Venetia.
With over 25 years of post-qualification experience in the field of taxation, Pallavi Bakru has worked in varied areas of expertise, including inbound and outbound structuring, advisory and regulatory compliance for both Indian and overseas investors. In her role as partner, head of privately held business and private client services at Grant Thornton, Bharat, she advises on restructuring, mergers, and slump sale for a portfolio of clients with a focus on family-owned businesses. She engages with a portfolio of clients which cuts across various industries, including software, FMCG, pharmaceuticals, real estate, aviation, and education. Her passion is for succession planning, professionally run family-owned businesses, highlighting diversity and professional goals. Welcome, Pallavi.
Thank you, Venetia. Very happy to be here.
It's great to have you both here. So first, of course, we will be eventually releasing the annual report. But before that, I'd like to invite Arvind to share his views and also insights on how the Indian art market has been performing over the last decade or two, and why we believe that this market has serious growth potential.
Thank you, Venetia. So let me start at the very outset. If we go back by about two and a half decades, the auction market, Venetia drives a particular vertical called Indian Art Investor that she gave you a little backdrop on. The firm has very meticulously tracked the movement of every single Indian artwork that has ever sold, starting from 1987. In fact, the first work of art that sold as a sort of blip on the radar was in 1965, a picture by F.N. Souza, who's now very celebrated modern. But from 1987, there has been an annual feature, so to speak, of Indian art becoming part of the catalog sections of all the prized auction houses worldwide. If we go back to the year 2000, which is where our analysis really starts making sense, because that's where the Indian art market starts finding a little traction, so to speak. The first slide will show you, Venetia, if you could move to the opening slide. The first slide will give you a sense of how this market has progressed over the past 2 decades. The first year of my business, which was actually 2001, saw a very sparse turn at the auction arena. There were only a handful of works, and the number of takers were even lesser. But over the period following that, somewhere around the mid to early 2000s, you see the market really beginning to find favor. As I was mentioning, if you look at the opening 4 to 5 years, it's extremely marginal at best. But somewhere along the mid of this decade, the market starts to really flourish. And this is call it early enthusiasm, if you would. So if you look at financial year 2005, 6, and 7, this is where the wave really starts. There's a bit of a crumple zone that the market encounters by virtue of coinciding with the Lehman Brothers and the subprime mortgage crisis. So there's a complete wipeout. But what happens over the following decade, over the following 10 to 15 years, is a phase of what I regard as market stabilization. So if you look at the first 20 years of this millennia, it's a phase that very clearly determines a market finding its bearings, the foundation being laid, and starting with what I regard as the catalyst, the COVID outbreak in 2020, you see the market surge upwards. Now, all great art collections the world over were defined and built following a major cataclysm. In the global context, it's the Second World War. There was a trace of art collecting that happened following the First World War, but the greatest art collections were built after the Second World War. That's because the wealthy of the world realized that their time is finite and the resources that they have are meant to be enjoyed while they're still on the planet. Now, in the globe's context, the first time and perhaps hopefully the only time in our lives, we saw something like COVID unify the entire planet into one common ground. In the Indian art context, you see that following that, the market completely escalates. It skyrockets, and the past 3 years have been a very clear indicator of the potential of this industry at large. If we move on to the next slide, we get a sense of how over the past 2 decades the market has grown. So from financial year 03 to 13, you see a growth which probably outshines every other industry I can think of. The turnover going from 20 odd crores to 315 crores, and then over the following decade, from 2013 to 2023, going from 300 odd crores to 1100 crores. These are very clearly indicative of a market that has really found its grounding, has its bearings very, very firmly in the ground, and is clearly on its way upwards. If we move on further, I mean, in terms of the numbers that we have here, we'll see that the opening decade has the turnover, the compounded growth going from Vinisha, sorry, if you could move on to the next slide. Sorry, a bit of a technical concern here, but we'll
Yes, there's, I'm not being able to actually move it to the next slide. Just 1 sec.
So, I mean, what we clearly see on screen are the numbers, justifying how, I mean, as art industry insiders, when we tell you that this market has grown, it's because the numbers merit, that kind of a positive sentiment. We have seen a fair amount of shakedown in terms of investor confidence getting rattled. When you look at the wipeout that existed following in the wake of the subprime mortgage post 2008, there was complete silence in the industry for close to 2.5, 3 years. But the greatest success stories were also built during that time. So when you look at the growth that we have on screen here, this 1600% odd growth, this also takes into account the wipeout that existed. Had that not happened, it would have probably been a far, far stronger number. Now, over the decade that followed from 2013 to 2023, though conservative in terms of growth, we still see the number outshine many other categories, many other industries at 265%. Vinisha, if I could request you to move to the next slide, please. I would like to speak about the past 3 financial years. From financial year 21, 22, and 23, there has been growth in excess of 20% year on year. It's again a very clear indication of the stability of this market, of how this industry has now reached a point where we're not really creating any new ground, so to speak, in terms of explosive growth, but there's stability, which is a key indicator of an industry that is bankable. Vinisha, the average price, if you look at the average price, it goes, it's again going up year on year, which is another very clear indicator of how this industry is stable. If you look at the turnover of these 3 financial years, it's in excess of 3,000 crores, which has come from the back of about 11,000 odd pictures that were sold. The sell-through rate, if you look at the the dinner platter that's been served, nearly all of it was consumed, 91% sell-through, which is actually a spectacular turn, barring a small portion of works that have still not found the favor of the market, but that is entirely understandable in a market that is still sort of finding new takers. And the average price at present is at about 29 odd lakh rupees, which again is a very, very healthy number. Vinisha. Vinisha, you're on mute.
Thank you, Arvind, for running us through those numbers. And sorry, there was some technical glitches going on over here today. But those are really eye-opening numbers. I mean, if you see the movement of the last 10 years and then the 10 years before that, the jump is significant. And it's a statement, literally, that it's the Indian art market is not just a blip on the radar. It is really becoming quite a force to reckon with. So thank you for sharing those numbers with us. I'd now like to invite Pallavi to share her experience as head private client services at Grant Thornton Bharat with respect to how art acquisition has changed over the past decade and a half from a personal effect to a capital asset.
I think that's an interesting question you raised, Manisha. And for those who just saw the, the bar chart that Arvind walked us through, you saw a blip in 2006 and 7. And that's really when an amendment was made in the Income Tax Act to remove art from the definition of personal effects. So let me just elaborate on that a little bit. Initially, personal effects were things like, your jewelry, your art, furniture, clothes, those were considered personal effects, and they were sort of never considered as an asset from a tax perspective. So obviously, when the kind of volume, you just demonstrated there was in the art market and the kind of growth that people were seeing, and wherever there's money to be made, tax can't be far behind. So actually, it was for the year ended 31st March 2007 that they actually excluded art and artifacts and jewelry from the definition of personal effects. So clearly, there was this awakening that here's a class of asset, which can be called an investment. It has the propensity to grow, and therefore it should be taxed. I mean, before 2007, very simply put, if you sold a piece of art, unless you were an auction house or an art dealer, you never paid any taxes.
That's right.
But this got introduced, and I think it speaks volumes for the way art started getting recognized. I mean, art has always been on the radar of the legislature. Earlier the accent was more on ensuring that the pioneers of art in India, their works don't go out. Like, Arvind was mentioning, Indian artists very early started finding a place in international auction houses. And then I think 1972 is when they brought out, a legislation to declare some artists as national treasures, which was largely Raja Ravi Verma, Amrita Shergill, Jamini Roy, Nandlal Bose and Rabindranath Tagore, where they said their works can't be exported. And obviously, the other interesting thing I see is when you see this chart of 28% growth, I think, Arvind, a lot of that is also coming from what I call the democratization of art.
Indeed.
There was a time art was the preserve of a very few, who could really afford it and who were enlightened enough to want to put their money there. I think today what has happened is there's a broader spectrum of people, one, who understand art, appreciate art. Why go far? Today, if you want to buy an expensive piece of art, galleries are willing to give you an installment plan.
Indeed.
It's something like going out and buying a car. You can buy it on installments. And I think that's kind of also democratize the market to have a much larger set of players. And I think that augurs very well, because it brings a lot more stability when you have, a lot more sort of constituents to that art market. So it's been an interesting development in the last, decade and a half.
Yes. Yes, Pallavi, that's true actually. And I think all these things have, like you said, they've added immensely to the democratization of art. And I think in the era that we live in now with, technology and social media and all of this, there's also an awareness that is increasingly being built, and there is a interest that is being built in art. So yes, absolutely, there is all positive movements in the market. Thanks for sharing those thoughts of yours, Pallavi. Arvind, after, you've just spoken about the last 20 years of the Indian art market and, where we started, where we've reached. In your opinion, where do you see the Indian art market, 30 years, say 30 years down the line? Where do you see the market then?
Venetia, there's a bit of abstraction in that question. It involves sitting with a crystal ball and, sort of conjuring up images. I'm not very good with that. But what I can say is, in the early 2000s, in 2001, 2, when I was sort of still a sort of a greenhorn in this space, trying to figure it out, I was asked a question by a very senior industrialist, as to what he felt the future of the art market was. And he said, "Mujhe batao, tell me in 20 years from now, where do you think the art market would be?" And the maximum that I could fathom was, 150 crores, 200 crores, because that was the widest that I could think of. So any projection that I make today, I mean, we've got the numbers in front of us. We sit with all this data that we analyze and research carefully. We put out these reports. The suggestion is that we're sort of crumpling the 20, 25% very, very easily. In certain sections within the market are far beyond that number. So we are moving in the right direction. What we must remember about art as an industry is it's not newfangled. When you speak of NFTs, or you speak of even AI, or you speak of crypto, these are newfangled concepts in some capacity. You don't know what will become of them. Like I remember when NFTs came out, everyone was racing to get these chimp icons that they became obsessed with. People were paying millions of dollars for it, which anyone with their intelligence in order would have realized was silly. It's like the emperor's new clothes playing out. But people went for it. When it comes to the art market, in the art world, we have a precedent of 100+ years where we have seen the Western market. We have seen a Picasso go from $10,000 to $1 million, in excess of $150 million, one single work of art. For us to say, in the Indian context, a picture by Ravi Verma would sell for 80,000 rupees back in the mid-1990s, and it's now selling for an excess of 40 crores, is a very clear indication of the journey that we're making. Now, what is unique to India is, as Pallavi was mentioning, the fact that we've got such a large, excited young community, all of whom have married technology into their lives. It's interwoven into the world's life. But along with this dreaded COVID wave that forced us into our homes, the fact that technology was available to us, the fact that we spent so much time, there was an inordinate amount of time that we spent at home with this bare wall behind us when we were sitting on Zoom calls, that all of us said, yeah, we need a work of art, behind us. Like Pallavi is now flanked by these, delightful pictures and accomplishments. Everyone realized that we can't live with blank walls anymore. And that is why you see this huge move towards buying art by the middle and the upper middle class, something that wasn't quite there. And to my mind, that is really going to propel the Indian art industry even further than any benchmarks that the Western world has offered to us. That makes me very hopeful, very optimistic. And if you were to ask me a question, I'd say that we'd probably be at 30,000 crores in 20 years from now. But again, who's to know?
That's right, Arvind. But in fact, interestingly, what the two things that you spoke about, one was, of course, the COVID, the pandemic that hit us. And then, well, online had already started. Online sales had already started. Technology had already become a fairly important part of our lives and the economy. But the pandemic gave it that boost. And also from all the data that we have, we've seen that online sales have actually contributed a lot to this growth that we have seen.
Yes.
And second, of course, is the disposable income. So yes, as the economy keeps growing and as technology keeps enhancing, your projections actually might be spot on. So let's let's see how the next 30 years unravel. Yes. So that's very interesting. Also, just wanted to check. Just wanted to ask, what are the changes that are happening in the Indian, social setup that also adding to this enhancement of an awareness and desire to buy art? Investing art, we'll come to later, but just, wanting to own a beautiful work. What are the changes that you have witnessed in the last few years and even recently that have added to that change?
I'm sorry, is this directed to me, Vinesh?
To you, Arvind, yes, sorry. Yeah.
Pallavi, sorry, I'll take this one then.
Sure. By all means.
Vinisha, change is upon us, and a very large part of that is cultural in nature. So if you look at what happened over the past month in Bombay, Mrs. Neeta Ambani opened a cultural center, which now will translate into the world's greatest culture in every form. I'm not talking of just the greatest artists and exhibitions coming to our shows, but there'll be the greatest operatic tenors, there'll be the greatest symphonies, the greatest orchestras, the greatest theatrical productions. All of this will become part and parcel of our, social fabric, something that has largely been absent in our context. When you think about any visit to London or to New York, you will go for one stage production, you will go to the MoMA or the Tate, and you'll even if you have nothing to do with these worlds, you will go and do that. It's a thing to do. It's been absent in our Indian, geography for reasons untold, but that is now upon us. It's happening. Over the next decade, I think the cultural exposure within India will rise so significantly. It's already there. We are already seeing it, right? The moment that becomes part and parcel of common vocabulary, where you're exchanging notes in common terms, again, that will translate into a very high level of comfort and ease around artworks. One of the biggest challenges that we as Indians have faced is art has been an intimidating or an extremely boring topic. It either scares you. So, if I speak to people who've gone and achieved, global feats that are unbelievable. But when the topic of art comes, they say, yeah, I don't know anything about it. I'm befuddled. Mujhe samjha sakta hai. Can you explain this to me? So to that end, that's going to change a lot. That will completely transform. And that is, I think, something to celebrate. This is something that I, as an individual, have been waiting for decades now. And it's sort of unfurled in all its glory as I see it. So that's one observation that I have, Nisha.
Okay, that's actually interesting, Arvind, and it's great that you brought up traveling to London and going there to view their art, and that reminds me of a recent piece that we had written on the British royal family, and how art actually constitutes about a third of their wealth portfolio.
Wow.
And so, Pallavi, I wanted to ask you: do you think that's limited to just the royal families, or is it also there in the Indian families where art is also now playing a significant role in wills and bequests as well?
Oh, definitely is. And I'll probably take this statement a little further and say that the rich today, whether it's industrial houses or the families who promote these, are really like the royalty of today, because they are the ones who are the biggest patrons of art and culture. And you just heard Arvind talk about their new art and culture center in Mumbai. You've got Kiran Nadar, who runs such a fabulous art museum in Delhi. So really, this has now become the preserve of not just the rich, but also the initiated. People are sort of learning more because this awareness has always been there in the more so in the Western world. I think with people traveling a lot more affluence that we're seeing in the country, people are awakening to sometimes it's just nice to have a lovely piece of art on your wall than have a nice big rock which you can't wear and go out all the time. You can appreciate art a lot more. So I think what we're seeing is that a lot of families are collecting significant art. And but naturally, if you're going to have a decent collection, then who gets what also becomes relevant. And as we make trusts and we draw out wills for people, we suddenly find that people are actually listing out who gets which piece of art. And when you look at this again, why would people not vie for a particular piece of art? Because every piece of art is unique. If you like a particular Hussein and you don't have it, believe you me, you can only lust for it. But if you want shares of Infosys, you can just go out in the market, liquidate any other asset and buy those shares. So in a way, art has a charm of its own because every piece is unique. And more often than not, every piece has a story around it. In every family, you'll find there are stories around why, how this was bought. So they do become a very significant part of, that whole succession and estate planning in terms of who gets what piece of work. And we are seeing that increasing. In fact, the interesting thing we're seeing now is people contemplating setting up trusts to house their art. So what will happen is in the following generation, people will be able to display those pieces of art in their homes or in their offices, but they'll not be able to sell them, which is pretty much how, for example, the British royalties done it. I mean, they've done it for not just their art, but even their jewels. So really, you can borrow a tiara and wear it, but you can't go out and sell it, So a lot of people who have significant collections are now sort of contemplating whether they should put into a trust so that the subsequent generations can, enjoy that art. They can, have it on the wall, on their walls, but they can't part with it. So really what we're seeing is that people are looking at it as creating a legacy, something that endures well beyond their lifetimes.
That's right. Ma'am, also I wanted to just, so this is like we've spoken about the art market in terms of the data and the numbers. We're talking about, the regulatory side of things, and also in terms of, art being part of the wills and, legacy. I recently came across this statement that art is no longer just an expense incurred to beautify one's home, but a way to celebrate life. So is that something that you can comment on? Do you have something to share about that?
So sure. I mean, I, of course, I will qualify that with a line of caution to say that not all art is investment. And, that's why people need people like Arvind to tell them where they need to put their money, because, there are artists who appreciate, there are artists who don't, they're just like a blip. You suddenly see them and then they're not heard of, they don't come up again. And obviously, and the moment you say investment, it's something that can be easily liquidated, and it's something that appreciates over a period of time. So when you look at investable art, I think you've got to be a little more careful. And I think that level of awareness has come in with the Indian market and, the people who are buying art. The other interesting thing, and I sort of, I've seen this firsthand with a very close friend of mine, is people are already buying art to mark occasions. Back in the day, when a child was born, you said, okay, let's buy a couple of sovereigns, or, if a lady gave birth to a child, you said, let's buy her a piece of jewelry. And people have actually now started buying art to mark occasions, whether it's a milestone birthday, an addition to the family of like a grandchild or something. And I think it's absolutely stupendous that, people can look at art that way and start building their collections. But like I said, I've still underlined it with that line of caution that not all art is investment. So you can, I mean, in fact, I encourage people, you should still look at something which is pleasing to the eye and you enjoy it. But then please don't think of it as an asset. Okay, right. It's just something you've enjoyed and it pays for itself if you're going to enjoy it. But when you talk of investable art, then, we're talking about a slightly different sort of league
category
of art, yeah. Whether it's established artists or it is up and coming artists.
That's right.
There needs to be a slightly more concerted decision making while doing that.
Absolutely. In fact, in all our reports and in all our conversations that we have had around art as an investment, that's, I think, one of the first things that we tell everyone is that, you need to, not all art is investable. And also when you're buying an artwork, you need to first like it, because that in itself, the intangible, pleasure and the gains that you get from that, that's why you're buying it. And, so that's of course, something that is a regular conversation that we have. But thank you so very much for sharing your thoughts on this. I
Very
think
Anisha, I just want to step in and just add a few thoughts here.
sure.
Pallavi, first of all, it's very endearing to sort of think of people celebrating occasions with a work of art. It's very endearing. It's a very sort of beautiful thought, and I hope that the sentiment sort of explodes across our country. To the point that you're making of not all art being a good investment, I think the majority of art makes a very poor investment. It's very important for anyone who's looking at art with the I word in mind, which is investment, not I.
Yeah.
That is, if you're looking at this as a financial asset, look elsewhere. The riders involved in being able to successfully translate it into profit is very, very challenging. The buy-ins for the portion of art that is a guaranteed return, so to speak, is so high that it rules out 99.9% of society. Mankind can't consider buying the works of art that I would advise people to buy, which is why we have a conversation only with the ultra high net worth circle. The second part is, if you, as like friends of mine come to me all the time and say, yeah, I've got 15 lakh rupees or 20 lakh rupees and I want to go and buy a picture, I've got a great bonus, or my son's coming along in the next 3 months, so I want to mark this occasion. Whenever anyone comes and says, I want to consider investment, I ask them to go out there, look at it from their own lens, forget about whether it's going to go up or down, and buy something that they can live with foreseeably for the next 5 to 10 years. To look at that as an investment from the outside is to decolorize a very vibrant picture. It takes the pleasure out of art. So that's my only thought, Vinisha.
No, I completely agree. And that's the point I was making, is that, sometimes you just buy things for the sheer joy of enjoying that piece of art. It may not be, a AAA artist or something.
Right.
And when you look at investment, it's a different way that you address, that whole act of acquiring that piece of art then.
Absolutely.
I think we can now perhaps move to the second part of this, the webinar, where we're going to release the report. And we'll talk about the findings from the report, and then we'll go back to a short session of further Q&A, where I'll pick up questions from the audience. So
how exciting. We're launching it.
Thanks, Vinisha.
Thanks, Pallavi. Yes, we should be launching it now. So just to let you know, the QR code could be scanned and you can get access to the report, which will be live on our website. I think we'll now just quickly jump into some of the key highlights from the report. We want all of you to please go through the whole report, but we're just sharing some key highlights from that. Let me just pull up this. Bobby, will you be sharing screen? Sorry. Yeah. Some of the key findings are as follows. The next slide, please. So we'll first take, of course, a macro perspective on the bigger numbers. The turnover itself was 1,145.5 crores. There were a total of 4,240 works that came up for sale, of which 3,833 were sold, which gave the market a sell-through rate of 90.4%, which is really high. The sell-through rate typically is an indication of the liquidity in the market. So the higher the liquidity, the better the market's doing, and the higher the chances of you being able to sell your work at a good price. The average price this year for the Indian artwork stood at 29.9 lakhs. So performance against the estimates. So typically all auction houses, they give a lower and upper estimate for each of the lots that feature in their catalogs. And based on these numbers, the market this year actually performed at 56% higher than the mean estimate that was calculated, which is fantastic. there were 164 records that were set this year. And by records, I mean that, artists set their own records. So 164 records were broken this year. 634 artists featured in this year's sales at auction. And there were a total of 132 auctions that were held selling Indian artworks, both in India and abroad. Now let's come to the next section where we talk about the market leaders. We'll start with the female leaders. So we have Arpita Singh, B. Prabha, and Meera Mukherjee. Arpita Singh had a turnover of 15.9 crores against the sale of 10 works. Next was B. Prabha, who had a turnover of 7.8 crores with 33 works sold. And then we have Meera Mukherjee with 7.5 crores against 7 works sold. We'll now see the leading male artists. So, of course, the familiar M.F. Hussain, F.N. Souza, and S.H. Raza. Hussain had a total turnover of 133.1 crores, which is really massive, against 173 works sold. Souza not too far behind with 125.6 crores against 200 works sold. And Raza at 119.7 crores with 109 works being sold. Now, this is actually an interesting slide. This talks about the distribution by price entry points. So we've broken up the market into 6 price brackets, where we start at below 5 lakhs, which is your tier 6, 5 to 20 lakhs, which is your tier 5, 20 lakhs to 1 crore, which is tier 4, 1 crore to 5 crores, which is tier 3, 5 crores to 10 crores, which is tier 2, and above 10 crores, which is tier 1. Now, obviously, the purple bars indicate the turnover, and clearly, the majority of the turnover has obviously come from the higher price brackets. But what is really interesting to see is the yellow line, which depicts the number of artworks that were sold. And that is actually, what shows the traction in the market, the volume in the market, the interest in the market. And as you can see, 58% of the works sold in FY23 were actually from the tier 6 bracket. Now, this actually speaks about a conversation we were having just a few minutes ago about very, very expensive artworks versus, artworks that are available to a larger audience because of the budget's possibilities and options. And it is this section of the market that has really strengthened in the last 5 to 8 years. That is what we have seen. It is not just the high-end above 1 crore, above 5 crore works that are selling. There is a massive movement in the tier 6 also that's happened. And this year, 58% of the works that sold were from the tier 6 bracket. We can now move to some important works that were sold in FY23. So we'll just do it category wise. So we've at Indian Art Investor, we have 3 categories of artists. The contemporaries who were born after between 1950 and 1985. And among those artists, the top 3 most expensive works sold was, the first one was by Anju Dodia, which was an acrylic on canvas. The second was by Rakib Shaw, which was sold at Astaguru for 2.5 crores. And the third was by Subodh Gupta, which was a work in mixed media, which went for 87.7 lakhs. We can now move to the modern artists. The modern artists are the artists who were born between 1915 and 1950. They hold the chunk of the market. They're ruling the roost right now in the Indian art market, at auction and even privately. And among the modern artists, these were the top 3 most expensive works sold. The first, of course, was by Guy Tode, which was an oil on canvas, which sold recently at Saffron Art for 47.5 crores. The second was by Tayyab Mehta, an acrylic on canvas, which sold for 41.9 crores. And the third was also by Tayyab Mehta, that was sold for 25.3 crores. We now move to the last category of artists, the pre-modernists. The pre-modernists were the artists who were born before 1915. And well, Raja Ravi Verma has clearly ruled this category in this year. All 3 works by him, all 3 oil on canvas, and ranging from 43.7 crores to 18.4 crores. And these are, of course, very typical Raja Ravi Verma works. So absolutely stunning works that have made it to the top 3 most expensive works in this category. So we've already looked at the macro perspective where we looked at the larger numbers. We thought we'll just do a small micro perspective viewing also of how the market performed in FY23. So in the micro perspective, what we're looking at is how the market has grown from the last year. So the turnover, there was a 9% jump in turnover. There was a 6% jump in the work sold, 11% jump in the works offered. The liquidity or the sell-through rate was just about 4.5 percentage point drop, but still at 90.4, it's at a very, very good rate. The average prices also went up by 3%. The number of record breaks, like I said, there were 164. Last year, there were 157. So the market's seen like a 4% jump in the number of records that were set this year. There was a very marginal 3% reduction or fall in the number of artists who appeared at auction this year compared to the previous year. And there was a 12% increase in the number of auctions. I think this could also be attributable to the whole, pandemic being more severe last year than it was in FY23. So that kind of changed the numbers there. When we look at the turnover distribution by segment, so typically when you look at art, there are 3 things that you take into consideration: the medium, the material, and the size. So on the material front, canvas has been ruling the market especially in terms of the turnover the works in canvas have been able to generate. On the medium front, oil has been the best performing medium, and the sizes, of course, the M-sized works have accounted for a majority of the turnover. This year, excess size, the extra small size, they have also accounted for, while they've accounted for a majority of the number of works sold, thanks to Raja Ravi Verma in particular, they've also contributed greatly to the turnover this year. So I think from here, I'd like to just invite Arvind to take over, where he can just share with us what were the works that proved to be really good investments this year.
Well, thanks, Manisha. This section is actually one of my favorites because, as I mentioned when I was giving an introduction, Indian Art Investor and the team therein has been very meticulous in logging every single Indian artwork sold anywhere in the world at auction into their database. If you could move to the slide to follow, please. We have a tool which is called the repeat sales chart, which actually keeps a track of every single Indian artwork that is sold on more than one instance. This allows for the team to have a very clear apple-to-apple comparison, where we can understand the investment value and the benefit that an investor has accrued. So if you look at this, this opening picture, this is a small, tiny mixed media work by an artist who's again not yet received his due. His name is K. Ramanujan. It was purchased in 2018 for 3.8 lakhs. It sold just a little over 3 years later for 9.6 lakhs, which earned, I'm assuming this is an investor because this work was held for a very short window. It earned, the owner of this asset 32%. If we could move on to the next, please. So clearly there is a case for even the low value, objects accruing this kind of growth, though it's a shot in the dark as far as our positions are concerned. If you look at investment options between 5 and 20 lakhs, this particular picture by another artist who's relatively unsung up until now, Antonio Xavier, this sold in March 2015, where his works were extremely sparse. We still speak of Antonio now, but in 2015, whoever acquired this picture was really taking a leap of faith, perhaps fell in love with the picture, but decided to deaccession it, to sell it, a little over 7 years later. Bought at 11 lakhs, sold for 73 lakhs, earning a compounded growth of 29.5%. The next slide, please. The next bracket, the next slab is from 20 lakhs to 1 crore. So if you're investing between this price and you're in this range, You could have picked up this picture by Satish Gujral in 2017 for 30 lakh rupees, which went on to sell in May last year for 66 lakhs, which is a growth of 17%. Next slide, please. Gujral Saab was a senior modernist. Now we look at a contemporary artist, someone who's still alive, around, and in the thick of their practice. This picture by Bharti Kher in the same price range, the investable range is 20 lakhs to a crore. If you look at this picture by Bharti Kher, it was bought in June 2017 for 36 lakhs. 5 years and a few months later, it's sold for 77 lakhs, earning 14%, which again is a very respectable sum for an artist who's still in her prime. Next slide, please. Now we ascend the ladder. We come into the 1 to 5 crore bracket, which is where it becomes interesting. This is an early picture, a very interesting abstract by Raza Saab. This was purchased in 2010 for 1.2 crores. 12 years later, it was sold for 11.6 crores, earning compound growth of 20.4%. So the indication clearly is that across price ranges, you will see growth if you're able to acquire pictures that have a certain importance in terms of the visual aesthetic, the size, the timeline when it was painted. There are several factors that need to be accounted for, but if you're able to follow that formula, you will record growth, which can range from between 15 to 35-40% depending on what the picture is. Could we move on to the next slide, please? In the above 10 crore bracket, now we come into the sort of rarefied portions of the domain. This picture by Tayyab Mehta, amongst one of his larger canvases, this sold for the first time in December 14 for 17.5 crores. This is a rickshaw puller and a trust bull, a combination of two very important subjects for the artist against a very vibrant background. When this work was sold, I'm sorry, we weren't quite done there. When this work sold 7 years later, it sold for 42 crores, went up from 17 crores to 42 crores, earning 12.6%. So the point being made here is there is opportunity across the board when you look at it as a financial instrument, which can accrue tremendous value for an investor. But one has to very carefully navigate, these set of rules and apply something that is in very short supply usually, which is patience. You have to be patient. You have to wait for the right time, and that's what really results in value. Now to speak of some of the other insights in the report. Next slide, please. We can refer to the contribution of the top 100 works. We can look at the performance of all the auction houses that have participated in the year, the distribution of the market across its various segments, all the record breaks that have happened, that have been sort of created by artists across various categories. Very interesting section which is focused on the online sales. We spoke of online sales playing a very vital role. We get a bit of a deep dive into how online sales have been a bit of a game changer for the business at large. The quarterly and monthly reviews, which are standard parts, since we release these quarterly and monthly reviews month on month anyway on our website for anyone who's interested. 2 new sections that we've added. One focuses on the top 10 artists who are on the rise, the artists to look at going forward for the future. And who are the new faces at auction? These possibly could be superstars in the making in the future. So these 2 new sections that I'm quite excited about. Now to look at the 5 most expensive works, as you can see, the list becomes fairly predictable. We've got Hussain Saab, we've got 2 pictures by Tayyab, Ravi Verma's classic, Yashoda and Krishna, and the most expensive picture for the year, which was this very vibrant, extremely collectible work by Gaitonde, which sold for 47.5 crores. Now, Vinisha, you'd asked me a question about projection, about trying to understand where we stand. If you were to look at this picture by Gaitonde, in 1995, which interestingly is about 30 odd years ago, the first picture that sold by Gaitonde at auction sold for 6.5 crores, 6.5 lakhs, I'm sorry. Now I think only in crores. That's where the market's at. But it sold for 6.5 odd lakh rupees. And from 6 lakhs, it's gone up to 47 crores. So that's the kind of leap that one can make if one is buying intelligently. So that sort of paints a very clear perspective for you to consider.
Thanks, Arvind. This was this was really fantastic. I mean, the numbers always fascinate, but the numbers are sometimes difficult. Is not everyone's cup of tea, but the visuals are. The artworks were fantastic, and the repeat sales. So of course, we talk about art, we talk about aesthetics, we talk about pleasure, we talk about the view and the appeal, and then we bring in investment, which becomes a little complicated, where we don't, not sure whether the work will actually appreciate it over time, and it comes the whole host of other questions and other things that need to be kept in mind. But the works that you shared with us just now do show, if you buy prudently and you buy carefully, the works can appreciate significantly over time, and you can make a good amount of money by investing in art appropriately. There are a few questions that have come up I'll just read them out. Hang on one second. So Arvind, this is for you, by Amitabh Singh. While art pieces from famous personalities like Raja Ravi Verma and Tagore are the benchmark and often beyond reach of common citizens, how does a common Indian middle-class citizen identify a good piece of art from an upcoming artist, probably a potential Tagore 10 years down the line? So any platforms to check out, or any checklist to identify such pieces?
Amitabh, thank you for that question. I can't reference, Mr. Tagore, because he was a Renaissance man, and he was such an accomplished human being at all levels. To just sort of define him as an artist becomes a bit challenging. But if we are talking of future talent, then I think there are no hidden rules here. It's actually very straightforward. The first is exposure. Platforms like the India Art Fair are a great learning ground to just go observe, see a very wide cross section of art. If you juxtapose that with visits to the museums within India to begin with, and also the world, the benefit of seeing museums in the world is you understand what the world is celebrated as great. When Gaitonde and Raza and all the masters start getting that round of applause, which is long overdue by the global giants, by these institutions overseas, we feel a sense of validation, which is absolutely unrequired. We've always known these artists to be great, but you get a sense of visiting these international museums to get a sense of what the world has considered great. Let it percolate into the Indian context. Visit the National Gallery of Modern Art. There's a great selection of art. Go to Mrs. Nadar's museum, which is an absolute delight in terms of the sheer spectrum of art that you can find there. And it's cross-sectional. It just doesn't have pre-modern, modern, and contemporary Indian art. It brings in a very diverse cultural mix. So make sure that becomes part of your monthly routine. That's a very, very good place to start. Introduce one weekend every month, I would say, to visit galleries. Galleries are more than friendly. In fact, they're desperate to sell in many cases. So befriend the gallerists, start speaking to them, create a little network where over the course of time, the first rule of buying art is don't be in a hurry. You don't meet your wife overnight or your lover overnight. It takes time sometimes. So spend time with it, engage with this space, allow the artworks to speak to you, come to understand what connects and why. If let's say you walk into a gallery and someone's saying, this is a great work of art and you must buy this, and try and question it. Very often we follow this herdistic pattern in the art world all over the world, where just because 20 people are nodding, you also nod, because you don't want to seem like, a buffoon, to suggest, I don't get what these very intelligent human beings are doing. Question. I think that's very important. The benefit of these times that we are in is technology coming to our aid. You've got every platform, every channel having either social media presence or a website that is usually updated. You can see what's going on. And now there are entry-level auctions that happen. So, Saffron Art has a sister concern called Story Limited, which has very affordable art starting at 5,000 rupees. So that becomes a very good place for you to keep a tab on what's going on, in terms of sales, in terms of movement, availability of some artists who you like might just sort of appear there. So take your time. Whether this individual translates into a giant like Tagore Saab is anybody's guess. That nobody really knows. But if you're consistent with your effort, if you keep doing this, then you'll sooner than later, find your Tagore.
Thanks, Arvind. I think that was a beautiful note actually to bring this webinar to an end, to find your Tagore. I think that's quite profound. And I'd really like to thank you, Arvind and Pallavi, for being here with us today. And a big thank you to all of you who joined this webinar. And we've tried to address, I think I was chatting with some of the people and addressing their questions because we were running out of time. But please feel free to reach out to us for any other questions that you may have that pertain to the Indian art market. And please remember that this report, the State of the Indian Art Market Report for FY23, is available on our website, which is www.indianartinvestor.com. And I think the QR code has also been shared in the chat box on the site. So you can please scan that and read the report. It was lovely having Pallavi, you and Arvind here. And thank you, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for being here today.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks, Venetia. Bye, Arvind.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Pallavi.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Venetia.